Well, good morning. Today I get to talk with Derek Sparks. He is an administrator at Kennedy Catholic. He's an assistant football coach at Pacific Lutheran University. That's kind of my connection to him. It's probably the first time he and I have actually talked one-on-one, although we've kind of been in some, I think, Zoom meetings together with FCA and some different things. If you can see on the wall behind him, Wazoo Cougs, he played running back for them back in the day as well. So without anything further, Derek, I appreciate you giving me the time to talk and share your views. And if you would give a little bit of your background and some of your history, maybe even family history, if that's pertinent, and then go into race and how race or racism has impacted you in that.
All right, good morning. Thanks for having me. Go Cougs, of course. Go Lutes. Go Lancers. Representing a lot of different brands. So for me, I grew up in a small Texas town where I was born and raised called Hungerford, southeast of Houston. Population of about 350 people. I grew up there with my grandmother and my mom. Didn't know my father. All I knew was my mom worked hard, and my grandmother pretty much raised me during those elementary years. And I remember hearing stories from my mom and my grandmother about how they grew up in the cotton fields in Texas, and how excruciating that was to pick cotton and to be in the heat of the day, and you had to watch out for snakes and all the different elements, right? And how their body was physically tormented at an early age, and they used to talk about the crocus sack. They was fill up with cotton, and so whenever us young folks start griping about how hard something was, they would always give us a lesson in, son, you don't know what hard is. We grew up hard, right? Mm-hmm. And then my grandmother, who she's very instrumental in my life growing up. She used to work for a prominent white family there in town who ran a cattle business. And so some of her duties would be to cook and clean, for this family. And I remember as a youngster, now mind you, Hungerford is about 1.5 miles of land. That's how big the city was, right? You want to call it a town, I guess. It wouldn't be a city. And so you could walk everywhere. And so I used to go visit my grandmother. And I remember I must have been, elementary age. And she said, I remember she told me, hey, when you come to this house, and when I'm at work, you have to go around to the back door. She said, never knock on the front door. And to me, I never really registered. I just thought that was a rule. Didn't understand the history behind, the help in the Black, person working for the white family. And there were some rules about, interaction with the family and so on and so forth. And then I remember just a block away, the family had an office building where they ran their cattle business. And I remember my grandma used to take me to do some of the cleaning. And boy, I couldn't wait to go and clean because I knew I was gonna get $5 at the end of it, right? Mm-hmm. So people always ask me, man, where you get your cleaning skills from? And I'm like, man, hanging out with my grandmother growing up, man, that thing had to be immaculate, right? Mm-hmm. And so fast forward to 7th grade, me and my mom moved out of my grandma's house. So before I go there, let me give you kind of the landscape of Hungerford. So we grew up in a house that was pretty much in dire need. I remember the heat in the house was only in the bathroom. So whenever we would get up, and if it was a winter time, we would have to grab our clothes and go to the bathroom because that was the only heat in the house. And I remember, you know, rodents in the house and snakes, and mom used to put our food in Tupperware because of the rodent issue. And I remember how that affected me tremendously because I just understand why we were so poor, right? And so lo and behold, we moved out. Seventh grade, we moved probably 6 miles up the street to a town called Wharton, Texas, where it was about 8,000 people population. Well, we moved into some government housing and to an apartment. And so, hey, I felt like we're kind of moving on up. Mom had our own place, and things were going well. I started playing the game of football in the 7th grade, and that's when I kind of realized that I kind of had something there with the game of football. It's something I gravitated towards because of many reasons. One, it made me feel good. Made me feel good, you know, to be able to compete and you know, football brings people together. And I had, you know, my white friends, my black friends, and man, we were having a good old time. But for me, you know, it gave me a sense of identity growing up. I think the absence of my father really affected my life early on because I realized that, you know, all of my brothers and sisters who I were playing ball with, they all had dads that would come to the games and they're, you know, very, very active in their lives and so on and so forth. And I remember that really took a toll on me growing up. And so my mom, bless her heart, she worked really hard. And we still was poor, but you know, growing up, you don't know any better, right? It kind of is what it is. And so, but yeah, there were times when, you know, mom used to send me to the grocery store with food stamps. And she said, hey, here's the list of things I need you to get. And how I used to be ashamed of being in a grocery line with food stamps. You know, I'd see some of my friends at the store or whatnot. And there was a stigma tied to, you know, a negative stigma tied to being poor. So in this town, Wharton, you know, the black folks lived on this side of the tracks and the white folks lived on the other side of the tracks, right? So it was pretty much clear, kind of, you know, the way things were. Again, not being young, you don't know what you don't know. But as I reflect back and recently going back to Texas in June and how I go, and it's like an eerie feeling I get because the game of football pretty much saved my life. And so fast forward to the 9th grade year, I had a videotape that one of my friends made of us playing football, and I sent that to my uncle in California, and he showed it to one of the local coaches. And man, I remember moving out to California as a 9th grader and playing, chasing my dream, man, playing the game of football. Because I knew at the end of it, and what my uncle always told me was, if you could do this correctly, you know, you can have your education paid for. And a reminder to me that mom probably wouldn't be able to send me to school. And so that was a driver for me to be the first in the history of our family to go to college and get a degree. And so I was really chasing that dream. And when I moved to California, man, it was kind of like, you know, old country bumpkin going to Hollywood, man. It was pretty traumatic, right? Yeah. So, but anyway, man, one of the things that really stuck out to me, especially in light of what's going on today, is I lived with the white family for a period of time while I was in California. One of my best friends, man, John Goldbaum, and his family took me in a period of time while I was in California. And man, the things that I learned being with a prominent white family as little as sitting down having dinner together
Mm-hmm.
as a family unit, and the conversations that would happen, and how constructive it was, and the togetherness of a family unit. I had never experienced that before.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of weird because here I am around white people, which, you know, I couldn't relate to, you know, in my earlier years. It just wasn't heard of,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But man, let me tell you, I grew 10 feet being around the Gold Bombs, and we used to have talks about recruiting. We used to have talks about race and the use of the N word. We used to talk about all these different dynamics that was happening all around us, and it was very um, enlightening for me as a young man growing up. And I always said that if I was to one day have a family, this is what I would want
Mm-hmm.
my family dynamic to look like, right? And so I think my path has been a little different. I think some of our brothers who have been blessed to have that athletic track, you have some grace in there where you don't experience a lot of the racism because you're the All-American on campus,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone loves you, right? People are having you over to their house, and it's a good old time. And yeah, is there things that come up along the way? Yes, but primarily, you know, it's a great life, especially if you're a kid like I was. When you coming from poverty and you coming from nothing, and then all of a sudden, because of your athletic prowess, you're in a whole nother world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I'm truly blessed to been able to have that experience. And I always tell people, you know, football saved my life. And they would say, well, what do you mean? And then I start running through the different things that I've experienced. And I wrote a book about it, by the way. Lessons of the Game chronicled, you know, my career going to 3 different high schools in 3 years, and all of the rules and rule bending and all that stuff from an educational standpoint. But by and large, man, I always try to communicate, especially in this day and age, to my white friends is and my brothers that I played ball with. It's like, hey, man, a way you can help us as a culture and as a community is to use your voice. It's like, unfortunately, it holds so much more weight than it coming from a person of color.
Mm.
Because America looks at it like, oh, we're just griping.
Mm.
We're just mad. You know, that was 400 years ago. You know, today's a new day.
Mm.
You know, and so, you know, one of the things that I can say with today is, you know, folks are relying on a person like myself to, hey, have a conversation. Hey, what should we be doing? How can we move things forward? And so I'm grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm grateful for that. I'm no longer the youngster coming up now. I'm one of the elders, and folks are looking to me. And man, let me tell you, man, it is, you know, you're talking about Martin Luther King and all the prominent Black folks in history that risked their life. Man, I couldn't fathom how much weight that is for a person.
Mm.
And here I am, 2020, and this stuff is heavy.
Yeah.
This stuff is really heavy. So that's kind of a snapshot of where I came from, how football changed my life. I went to Washington State after going through the recruiting process. Loved Mike Price and my experience there as a Coug. It wasn't always, you know, peaches and cream. Of course, you know, we were faced with, at that time, the Aryan Nation in Idaho.
Yeah.
You know, pretty prominent at that time. And I remember, you know, Coach used to tell us, hey, when you're out and about, you know, keep your head on the swivel, like make sure you know your surrounding,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and there is some death threats and stuff like that around racism. I remember a couple different times, there were a couple of police officers in town that it seemed like he would always pick on kind of the players from California, you know, pulling us over, you know, just kind of giving us the riot act just for no reason, you know, say, hey man, we're just students trying to play some football, man. We're not here to cause any trouble. And so that's kind of it, man. And then I graduated from college, got my degree. I had a cup of tea with the San Francisco 49ers, didn't make the team. And then boom, I'm into the real world. And here I am trying to transition from athletics to the workforce, and how challenging that is. And then you start to understand the systematic makeup of America and how it works, right? And I think, you know, man, it's like, wow, no longer a football player. You don't identify as a football player. Now you get to live what my mom and my grandma used to tell me about, and other folks, of how hard it is for Black people to advance, you know, in America, right. You know, and I was like, well, man, I have my college degree. I was like, yeah, you at least got to have that, you know. You might want to go get your master's if you really want to, you know, have an opportunity. So that's where I come from. Some of my best friends are white folks that I love, like brothers and sisters who've had an impact on my life, and they're just an extension of my family. And then when I became a head football coach at Garfield, and I started to understand, you know, again, the educational system and how our kids, in particular kids of color, are being left behind, man, in massive rates, man, was very disturbing for me, you know, and to me. So one of the things I did when I was at Garfield is I started a tutoring program right after school. I required all the football players to be in the career center, which, you know, I ran at the time, and I had a partnership with Seattle University. And all we did for an hour was we did homework help and tutoring. Because my goal was, you know, previously, you know, the team was 1-9. They had a lot of 5-weekers, meaning kids didn't have any grades. I said, okay, we're going to start right there to fix the problem. And it just was an eye opener how, you know, kids get pushed along, and the barrel gets kicked down the road on our kids. And it's like, you know, but it starts with me, you know, to change that. And so I say, how can I affect change in this current role? And man, had a great year, you know, first time in the history of the school, I think since said like 20 years that we went to the state playoffs, blah, blah, blah. They said, well, what was the secret sauce? The secret sauce was have kids be eligible, like concentrate on academics. Instead of being a student athlete, right? And so one of my rules, I didn't have a bunch of rules, you know, was the champion rule: be where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be there, doing what you're supposed to be doing to the best of your ability. That was the culture that I was going for. And the only rule I had was no N-word. That we are not going to be a group that's going to rampantly be using the N-word in the weight room, on the sidelines, in competition, when we're in school. We're not going to be that. We're not going to identify with that. And boy, did they look at me like, what are you talking about? Coach, it's in the music. I was like, well, pick the edited version. I don't want to hear it. And this conversation about the N-word, and this is how I explain it to kids, because you know, I'm a champion for young people. So the story I give them is, when you hear the N-word in music, you have to understand that Black people don't own the record companies. They don't. Now, lately with Sean Puffy Combs and Jay-Z, they've kind of, you know, branched out and understood ownership, right? But back in the day when NWA came out and it was F the Police, the person putting that music out wasn't Black. And I said, so think about it. You are purchasing content that you listen to on your earphones, that you internalize, and it's put out by someone that doesn't look like you. Mm. And how does that make you feel? So we have normalized the N-word, and then we want to turn around and say, well, why does black kids use the N-word like they do? Mm-hmm. It's like, because we've poisoned their brain. Yeah. We've given them the green light and made a profit on the use of the N-word. Mm-hmm. I say, so shame on us as a community, shame on us as record execs that said it's okay to put out that content, and now you want to know, now you don't understand why there's black on black crime and why there's black on black hate, you know, because in the music it's very prevalent,
right?
You know, and so those are the lessons that I try to give young people. And us, you know, if you go and you're a consumer of that, then you are paying for someone else to run a corporation that's using a derogatory term that's talking about you.
Yeah.
That it makes no sense.
Yeah.
And so, you know, as an educator, man, I love to dialogue with our young folks about it. And one thing, man, that just, I cringe when I hear it. You know, I was at Starbucks one time and there was two young boys ahead of me. And every other word was the N-word. And oh my God, I was embarrassed, but I wanted to go there with them, and I didn't because there was a lot of people and I didn't want to put them on Front Street and embarrass them. But man, we are in a world of hurt when we think that it's okay to use the word just like it's another word.
Yeah.
You know, I don't use it. You know, in my family, we don't walk around using the word. And I tell them all the time, you think Jay-Z is walking around his mansion in California calling Beyonce the N-word? Mm-hmm. Probably not, bro. Mm-hmm. Probably not.
Yeah.
So why are we doing it?
Yeah.
You know, so that's just a little tidbit on some of the things that I've been faced with so far. This conversation about race, and kind of looking at the information you sent, is I think what Black folks are feeling is like, you know, and I always go back to sports. It's like, we can't win. We feel like the game is fixed.
Right.
There's a social contract that has been broken by the establishment over a period of time. The murders by white police officers, right? The systematic racism that we feel like have been holding us back for so long, that limit us from opportunity. Let's go way back to Tulsa and Rosewood, where Black folks finally pulled themselves up by their bootstrap, had wealth, had ownership, right? And the establishment came in and murdered and slaughtered and burned down those communities. The mass incarceration of Black men in this country, even lately, has been an eye-opener for me as I've continued to educate myself on why is so many Black men in prison. And I watched the documentary, The 13th, and I said, holy moly, this is very disturbing.
Yeah.
This is very disturbing. And so those are the things that I've been doing, is to continue to educate myself, to continue to educate and have conversation with our white brothers and sisters, to have them understand that no longer can you be on the sidelines and be a spectator to the game.
Yeah.
Right?
There's 2 points that you've brought up that I want to, that touches on. There's 2 questions I want to ask. I'll go with that one first because you just brought it up again. And that's partly why I'm doing this myself, right? Is I felt called, like I need to do something. But at the same time, hey, I'm a white guy. What should I say? Like, do I have the right to say anything? And you know, the fears of, I don't want to come across as paternalistic, right? But I think it is imperative for white people to stand up alongside, and not necessarily to be the ones out front, but sometimes it needs to happen that way too, because of the past and the systems the way they've been put together, right? So white people coming alongside and helping to empower people of color to achieve equal treatment in every area. And then, so maybe just touch briefly on that and the role that you see that white people need to have. And then the other thing that you brought up in a couple different ways is your own history of not having a dad in the home, and then getting to see in the family that you moved to California with, hey, this is what a family unit should look like, right? And so, the statistics are not good in the African-American community. 70-some% of homes don't have a dad in the home, right? And it wasn't necessarily that way a few decades ago. So maybe what you see as the change that has caused that, what we can do to reverse it, and part of that, I think, is the modeling. If you don't see it, how do you know what to do at some level, right? So you got the opportunity to see it, although not from your own family, right? So maybe touch on the role of whites, what you'd like to see white people do to lead with you, and then touch on the issue of the nuclear family and the problems that are there right now in the Black community.
Yeah. So one thing that I've been having a conversation about lately is to my white friends is to, hey, here's how you can help. When you talk about being an ally and a true person that is progressive and want to see change, everybody's talking about, well, you got to be the change. Well, how are you going to be the change? Well, you got to educate yourself. You have to educate yourself. You have to understand that there's a root issue. It's no different than if you're gardening. Like sometimes you got to get down to the root, right? If you don't get down to the root, it's going to keep growing back, right? If you don't pull the roots out, it's going to continue to grow. And so as our brothers in this, this human race is no longer going to be acceptable to watch this go down from the sidelines. And what I mean is, with social media, with this young generation being progressive and not standing for it, it's time for white people to say, hey, I want a voice in this. I want to be a part of the change. I'm not going to let history pass me by. And I look back in 2020 and someone asked me, hey, what were you doing during those times? If you were sitting on the couch eating bonbons, watching CNN or Fox News, man, that's not going to work anymore. And so what we're asking our brothers and sisters to do is look, don't just say you're not a racist. You have to show your immediate community that you are anti-racist, that you're not going to stand for it. Mom and dad taught us early on the difference between right and wrong. And so fundamentally, that's how I look at it. I try not to put it in a black and white term. When I looked at George Floyd in that video of him being murdered, that wasn't a black or white issue for me. That was a right and a wrong issue. And that's how I viewed it. And that's how I continue to view it, is if it's okay for a person of authority to kill a person knowing that he's being videoed, then that is fundamentally wrong. And so I want my white counterparts to come alongside that voice to say, yeah, we agree with you, coach. Like, that's just not, I don't care what that guy did. I don't care if he cursed at the officer. I don't care if he resisted. I don't care if he had a $20 fake bill in his pocket. Arrest him, take his butt to jail, right? But you can't be executioner in the streets of America because you have a badge and you feel superior. And so for my white brothers, and believe me, I'm having these conversations every week with my white friends about, hey man, what'd you do this week to affect change? Did you get on social media? Did you denounce? Because we'll be on social media and we'll be scared to have a voice because of what someone will will say, or we may look like whatever, and we live in fear. And so my challenge is to not live in fear. To, hey man, I don't agree with that. Like, we have to live in this community together, and let's pull our Black brothers and sisters up with us. Let's start with our educational system. Let's start with the legislature. Let's start with, what are some of the things that we can do to affect change? Prison reform. Let's get behind that. Police reform. Let's get behind that. Educational, changing the education in our schools where we're teaching real history. Let's get behind that. One thing white folks hate to hear, reparations. I'm not a reparations guy. I don't represent that. But what I will say is I think there should be a stimulus package given to every neighborhood that was redlined and intentionally segregated, right? In America. I think there's a stimulus package that, hey, we're going to build up those communities. We're no longer going to allow in every city in America for there to be a ghetto. And you wonder where the problems come from. You wonder where these kids are growing out of the concrete from these places. And yeah, some of them go on and they play athletics and they become musicians and they use their different talents to pull themselves up and their family up. But it shouldn't be just about entertainment and sports.
Right.
So how do you change it? Prison reform, police reform, real education in our schools. And we need a heck of a stimulus package to pull our Black communities out of the gutter. We really do. Because as you've seen, like when I look back at history, we are some talented people. When you look at all the inventions and things that Black folks have put in the think tank, and now the whole world is using, right? And one of my questions is, hey, what did those folks get compensated?
Right.
Did those trademarks have their name on it? Did that patent have their name on it, or was it stolen from them and to build someone else's wealth? And so that's what I'll say for my white brothers and sisters that I love is, hey man, don't be a spectator. Don't say you're not a racist. We need to see from you that you are anti-racist, not by what you say, but about how you do and how you go about your business. If you own a business and you are a CEO of a company, you have to start to diversify the workforce and the people that you hire. It has to reflect the community. If you are an administrator at a high school or any school, you have to hire Black folks who, will come and help influence the culture, and so for me, I walk in a lot of rooms here in Washington, and a lot of times I'm the only Black person in the room. And to me, that's very disturbing, very disturbing. So man, I want to see our white brothers and sisters just truly, like you're doing, Dan, man, this is awesome what you are doing. This is the epitome of not sitting on the sideline and saying, you know what, I'm not going to live in fear. I'm going to use my platform and I'm going to have a voice. I'm going to create a platform so young, prominent people in the community to get out the message. Like, that's what we're talking about. No longer sitting on your heels, but getting out front and taking the lead so young people can see that, hey, Dan is very passionate about this work. He is very passionate. He's not sitting on the sideline. He knows the difference between right and wrong, and he's not fearful of what the next person going to think of him. And so hopefully I answered that question. And then the next question.
The nuclear family.
The nuclear family. So I didn't have a dad coming up. It was very important to me. And my experience with being in a nuclear family, seeing how powerful it is. And what I will say is, let's get to the why. Why aren't our Black men in the family unit? Some of it is personal choice. Some of it is because they're sitting in a cell in some prison throughout America.
Mm.
The other issue is they have a criminal record and they're a felon. They can't vote. They can't hold a job because no one's hiring felons. So what are they doing? They're out there hustling. They're out there putting their life at risk trying to make a quick buck because, how the race start. They started the race on the wrong foot and so forth, and they got themselves into trouble because they're in these red line communities where all it is to do is hustle. That's all you see. And you know how it works, Coach. You're going to do what you see.
Mm-hmm.
For me, as an example, when I was coming up, did I see my friends selling drugs? Yes. Did I see, my friends go to jail and go to prison? Yes. But what was my vehicle to get out? My vehicle was football. And I would not compromise that for anything. Nope. I'm not smoking out. I'm not doing drugs. I'm not selling drugs. I'm not stealing. I'm not doing anything that's going to get me in trouble where I'm going to risk my goal and my dream.
Mm-hmm.
And so, unfortunately, can't every black man be, an athlete?
Right.
So the family unit is dynamic. I think it's a game changer. It was a game changer for me. But I think ultimately, man, it comes down to when you look at the statistics and you say, where are all the black men? They're sitting in a cell.
Mm-hmm.
Or they have a criminal background and they can't make a decent wage. So they result to hustling. Like I got to go out and I got to feed my family.
Yeah.
And then the result from that, black on black crime.
Mm-hmm.
And then the cycle just continues.
Yeah.
It continues. And so, but hey, I'm not giving anybody a pass. I mean, we still got personal choice and freedom in America. And so, I just think we need help.
Right.
The black community has been beaten down for so many years. Like there is no wealth. I explained to my mom used to explain to me, she said, son, when I pass on, like I don't have anything to leave you.
Mm-hmm.
And like to wrap your mind around that, like, so one of the things that I'm very conscious of is my children is like, I have property, I have rental property. I am in 2020 building wealth for my family and where I come from in 2020.
Yeah.
It's like, holy smokes. When I was in high school, my best friend that I lived with, man, they had so much money. It was like, wow. I used to look around and be like, man, there's a swimming pool out back. Like we living in Granada Hills. Like this is, it was another world,
Mm-hmm.
So I hopefully I answered the question on that.
Yep.
But man, I am so hopeful when I look out there and I see white folks in the streets with black folks, Asians, and everybody is conscious about things have to change in America. Man, it's so refreshing. And I want people to understand that, look, let's not get it confused. There's protesters, there's the rioters, there's the looters.
Mm-hmm.
All of them serve a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to understand that we've been protesting since Martin Luther King and the late John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis, who just passed, who was arrested 45 times and had his skull bashed in by police officers.
Mm-hmm.
What we have to understand is like these things that you see in the streets are learned behavior. White folks have been rioting and looting Native Americans and black folks for centuries. And it's a learned behavior. So why is it okay for one group gets a pass and the other group, doesn't get a pass? I just don't understand the mindset. Is we're so focused on the what and not the why. The protesters have a goal in mind, and they're out there with their voice, and then the looters, the rioters come in, and the anarchists, and they're there for their purpose. And then you got the rioters. They say, well, what's the why? Why would someone risk their life in America in 2020 to go through a broken glass door to go get a freaking gallon of milk. Are we in such dire straits in America where the economic disparity in our community is so bad that we would have to go and freaking risk our life of going to jail and possibly even dying over freaking pair of Nikes? Like, it's just like, people, we're so focused on the what and not the why. And so if we don't solve these issues in our community, if we don't give a stimulus to these communities to build them up, it's going to be a cycle. It's going to be a continued cycle of the same thing. And I'm not a monument guy where I'm saying tear the monuments down. I think the monuments serve a purpose. Leave them there. That's a mirror. That's a mirror for us every day to look at and say, yep, that guy right there was a slave owner. Yep, he was a slave owner. That's where we come from. It's a reminder. But I think we could be more intentional as a government to say, hey, we want to put more Native Americans, and we want to put more African Americans up who've been prominent in our history and has changed the trajectory of where we are. We want to also memorialize them.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's how you fix it. I don't think you tear it down. I think you just replace it or add so there's some equity in it where we're just, it's a reflection of our history and where we come from.
I think history is a pretty important thing. You touched on it with education and what's the true history. And if you just tear it all down, what lessons are you going to forget, right? I think there is some importance in hanging on to some of that. Last couple things. Is there a mentor that has been really significant in your life? And then after that, what gives you the greatest hope for the future?
So for me and how I live my life, you know, I'm a believer. So first and foremost, I believe that we are all called. We all have a calling on our life in this day and age to be a part of history, to be a part of the change. God has called us to use our voice, has called us to be vulnerable, has called us to not live in fear, and to affect change. And so when I reflect on my life, one of the things that I'm conscious of every day, and I talk about it with my family, is the dash. We were all born on one day. We're going to exit this world on another day, but the time in between is called living your dash. And so what motivates me beyond the black and white issue is, hey, am I fundamentally a good dude? Mm. Am I a good coach? Am I coaching my guys at the first dimension? Am I coaching them in all three dimensions? Meaning, am I drilling down to understand who these young men are and where they come from, so that when they leave here, they can say, wow, Coach Sparks loved me for being a person, mm-hmm. and not a football player. Mm-hmm. Living your dash. Are you doing everything that you've been blessed with to be a part of the solution that we are called to fix? Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm motivated by. And that's my mantra. You know, I wear this shirt, game time, because it's game time, man. It's game time in everything that we do as a community. And if we don't approach it that way, there's no way we're going to be the greatest country in the world. Mm-hmm. There's no way. We can't look at America right now and say we're the greatest. We can't. And that's sad, because there's so many people that came before us, blood, sweat, and tears, and lost their lives. And now in 2020, it's like we took 2 centuries back. Mm-hmm. And it's very sad. So I just want to encourage people to, man, live your dash, man, because when you're gone, you can't get it back. What's your legacy going to be, Coach? Mm-hmm. When people look back and say, well, you know, what did you do? You know, and if you don't have anything to show for it other than materialistic things, man, you know, woe to the man that didn't recognize his blessings. So that's how I live my life. And my mentor was my Uncle Jerome. You know, he was my mom's brother. He took a liking to me as a young man and gave me some guidance and told me that, hey, I'm gonna give you the secret sauce. And that secret sauce is you have to go get an education in order to change the trajectory of your family. And man, I held on to those words, and he brought me out to California to live my dreams, man. And lo and behold, I graduated from Mater Dei High School with honors, and was one of the most highly recruited kids coming out of Southern Cal. And I look back and I said, man, if it wasn't from Uncle Jerome giving me some guidance and some pep talks, and to this day, I've never done a drug in my life, and I contribute that to him, because he always told me that your body is a temple. What you put in it will determine how far you can go. And so, man, I can be around people that's doing it, but they know that my mantra is I am anti-drugs, you know. And so this is one of my things, and one of the things I talk to my players about and young people about is yeah, you don't have to be in the in crowd. It's okay to be your own person, your own man, and travel your own road and your own journey. So yeah, so Uncle Jay was it for me, man. He saved my life. I look at him like he's a dad. On Father's Day, I love on him and make sure that he knows that. And again, where's our black men? Right there. Uncle Jerome was my strong black man that I identified with, that didn't abandon his family, and he was there for me. And so that was awesome, man. It was a game changer for me.
Great.
So I just want to encourage you. I want to encourage the viewers, man, to live your dash. Get out there. Don't live in fear. You don't be on the sidelines watching this thing go down, man. Figure out some kind of way that you can help. And there's some resources. What I would encourage your viewers, Coach, if you wouldn't mind, is watch the documentary on Netflix called The 13th. That thing is mind-blowing. It's awesome. Another way folks can help is the black businesses. Identify the black businesses in your community. It might be a restaurant, it might be a mom and pop shop, and go and support them. Hey, I don't know if you like black BLM, Black Lives Matter, the organization. I don't know if folks are for it or against it, but hey, make a donation, you know, because they're doing some great things. I don't always agree with all of the messaging coming out of it, but at the core of it, I understand why it needed to be formed. Continue to read books. White Fragility is one that I've been recommending to my white folks that I love and care about. And the first thing they say, well, I'm not a racist. I'm like, dude, it has nothing to do with you being a racist. It's about educating yourself, right? What else? And then, of course, the protest. If you're one of those people that wants to go and join the protest and do it peacefully, then by all means, man, go and show your support. But I think with the pandemic, and I think with the racial pandemic, it was a perfect storm for change to happen. And I think that's what we see.
All right. Well, Coach, I appreciate your time and your thoughts. And if you want to send me any of those resources, I'll include them in the video link. And then even over the next few weeks, if something else comes up, send it to me and I'll add it on. So okay. I really appreciate your time, Coach.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on. Godspeed to you.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.